welcome back to another video, and the first thing I want to say is I hope this video won't come off as too cliche, because I'll be talking about, well, probably the best known play in the entire English history, which is Shakespeare's Hamlet. It is my favourite Shakespearean play, that is without a doubt, and it's been so since high school. I think it's such a raw and insightful revelation of human nature, depicting all the essential aspects of the human experience, and in particular, the unavoidable problems that we struggle with. Although I know, of course, there are so many themes in this work that could be explored, there are two which stood out in particular to me, and I wish to focus on those themes. So the first one is the question of how one should act in the absence of grounded beliefs. And I think this is the situation that everyone would find themselves in at times, a sort of nihilism and confusion that a lot of us would find ourselves in, and many of us would call that like a midlife or a quarter-life crisis. When you don't know what to believe, when you don't know what matters, and that results in a sort of paralysis of not knowing what to do with your life. The second one that I want to talk about is this unsettling discrepancy between surface appearances of how people are and act in society and how people really are on the inside. And the latter is presented in this play and in life in general as well, I think, as almost inaccessible, and our hero Hamlet is excessively tortured by this fact. Let's start with the first topic, the confusion of beliefs which lead to paralysis of action, and that is also why we call Hamlet like the most epic procrastinator. So let's discuss first how this confusion is manifested in the play. We must consider certain contextual factors. What I'm going to do now is go through these contextual factors in like a really dumbed down way. Obviously it's more complex than that, but let me just go over it in a really dumbed down way. So at the beginning of the play, he's shown to have returned from Wittenberg, which is a city at the heart of developing like Renaissance values such as logical reasoning and humanism. And then he arrives back at the Danish court, where we kind of see a sort of medieval values of feudalism and like chivalric honor, and perhaps some sort of superstition still dominates. So here's a contrast, and that is the conflict of his beliefs. So how is this conflict shown in the play? We know the entire play is about him contemplating whether he wants to like kill Claudius and avenge his father, right? And his father's ghost comes and tells him that he was killed by Claudius, and Hamlet, to him it seems like it's an insufficient reason to take action, because he doesn't know if the ghost is real, and he doesn't know whether like what the ghost said was real. So it seems like he needs to reach a sort of empirical evidence via his investigation that kind of establishes a logical chain that allows him and justifies his taking action. Now, how is this relevant to the context? Well, we see that in like pre-humanistic and pre-enlightenment eras, people can act rationally in all sorts of violent ways against the lives of others. For example, you know, all the burning witches, the drowning, hanging people without evidence. It's like, oh, if you drown, you're innocent, and if you float, then you're guilty, which honestly makes no sense. And that, you know, just acting on a lot of superstitious or religious zeal to just kill people. This firstly is due to a lack of regard for the value of each individual human life. And secondly, it's a lack of regard for reason and truth. They don't act for reasons of truth and logic and, you know, fairness, justice, etc. Hamlet values those things because of his exposure in Wittenberg. So this is why he's in a paralysis of action, because he thinks, oh, just a ghost comes to me and says that Claudius killed my dad. Well, I'm not just gonna go kill Claudius on this because it's not a sufficient reason to act that doesn't fit with his conscience. So how is this conflict actually verbalized by him in the play? Let me give you some textual evidence. So consider his most famous "to be or not to be" soliloquy. He contemplates whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles. And he thinks whether he would rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. For conscience does not make cowards of us all. So firstly, from here we know that he's reluctant to thrust himself into the world. One takes part in the world by acting, especially according to the norms of society. This sort of dilemma is often akin to what many people go through in life, because oftentimes we don't know whether we want to pursue those things that society values, such as money and a prestigious job, because we think those things are very strenuous to pursue. And even if we do get them, at least for some people, neither the process nor the end result is capable of giving us any joy. But in the meantime, there is so much pressure from society to pursue what everyone values and urges you to pursue. We're social animals, so it's very difficult for us to kind of find ways to consolidate our self-worth without pursuing what everyone values and thinks should be pursued. Suppose someone chooses not to partake in the fight of life, or whatever we call it, because they think it's rather meaningless, choosing rather not to pursue material goods or social prestige, but living like a simpler life. They may be viewed as failures or cowards or incompetent. Clearly, Hamlet thinks this is such a cruel fact and position, because he says, conscience does not make cowards of us all. Another difficulty is how we are able to gather the courage and resolution to pursue ends that are not desirable or valuable to us. If you don't sincerely believe in something or want something, it's very difficult to devote yourself fully to that pursuit, right? Hence, here's the question: does being conscientious to our true desires make us cowards in the eyes of society? So how does Hamlet finally respond to this dilemma? I would say he ultimately succumbs to the pressure of acting without conscientious reflection. And this is the biggest tragedy of the play, not his death at the time of revenge. Near the end, he says, "My thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth." He has reached an acute awareness of the futility of staying aloof and loyal to his conscience, and this was in part a reaction to Fortinbras's example, who takes revenge with determination. Ultimately, Hamlet does complete his revenge, but there is a key fact to be noted. He never extorts a confession from Claudius before death, and this largely undermines the typical sense of completion and fulfillment gained by the revenge hero in most revenge plays. And it's the problem underlying this fact that leads us into the second topic of appearances and reality. So basically, the other really painful reality revealed in the play is the fact that in life we are forced to deal with appearances. We are aware of the inevitable discrepancy between surface and reality, but we're almost unable to access the latter at all, so a lot of our judgments and experiences can only be based on the former. We are forced, in a sense, to live the majority of our lives without any substance, like accessing any real substance below like the sea of facades that we're all swimming in. So drawing on the example that I've mentioned before, Hamlet successfully enacts the actions of a revenge hero. He has played according to the revenge plot and completed all his needed actions, but he never gets any real satisfaction or like revelation of substance out of it, because he was never able to ascertain whether Claudius was the true killer. And this ultimate tragedy is the most important depiction of this lack of access to any substance underlying the facade of human interactions. And that is what has pained Hamlet, in fact, since the beginning of the play. So when others mourn for his deceased father, he calls their attention in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. While for himself, he thinks that forms, moods, shapes of grief can never denote him truly, for he has, within which passes show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. Basically, he thinks all the others are acting without sincerity, and he disdains that. He feels sincere grief, but he doesn't like showing it in the same form as others, because that makes him no different from them. Like, on the surface, he's just assimilated into them. And he thinks that no outer display can sufficiently convey his real sorrow on the inside. Even when he sees the ghost of his father, he's unable to trust the ghost completely, for he ponders, the spirit that I have seen may be a devil, and a devil has power to assume a pleasing shape. We know that Hamlet is not wrong in assuming that each person is essentially acting their part in life without much sincerity. For example, like Claudius, he's such a typical example, his duplicity is displayed blatantly in front of others compared to when he was alone. Hamlet says of Claudius, one may smile and be a villain. And what is particularly ironic is that even when Claudius is alone, he is acting. And he is aware of it. For example, like while he was praying, he says, my words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to have and go. And this kind of reveals a really sad and ironic truth, that we act our false selves in front of others too much, that this false self becomes part of our identity and we are subsumed into it. We act to ourselves even when we're alone, and the surface is blended with the inner substance and even eventually erasing the latter. And this perhaps is also one of the reasons why we realize we never access any substance, because the substance inside probably doesn't exist. Hamlet's feigned madness can be interpreted as an attempt to escape from enacting the social role because he is so disgusted by the necessity of doing so in life. In the end, he embraces death happily, noting, to what base uses we may return. And he essentially denies any sense of nobility in the nature of human life. And he sees death as an escape from having to live up to false facades in life. And I think a lot of people whose reported suicide reasons can be quite similar to that. As a summary, I would like to say I found the play so acutely revealing of how our lives are, especially in such a depressing way. The two issues I brought out in this essay is precisely what many people struggle with in their lives, and personally, I have gone through stages in my life where I am exceedingly tormented by either of these, or maybe sometimes both. At the same time, it's a confusion of not knowing what I want and what I should do because I lack faith in just about everything. And also there's this painful realization, because we all crave connection and you realize you're not connecting with people because you never are able to access them. And obviously I'm not depressed about those two things all the time, but people just fall into stages where they suddenly oh god, that is such a sad truth about life. And then you adjust and then you carry on, or sometimes you feel oh, it actually gets better. So I'm curious to know in the comments what you guys think about those two themes and about the play in general. And if you enjoyed my video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.